anything on YouTube. Still says it's still the same. Oh, okay. I think it started.
Woohoo!
All right, we are live.
Indeed.
Yes, it's a little delayed, but looks good. Looks good. All right, man. Balach, welcome back to one of our weekly chat, and we had decided this week we're going to talk about renewables. You know,
Indeed, the crazy topic, huh?
everybody talks about renewables, but nobody seems to know anything about it. So we're going to drop all the truth bombs on everybody. It's
Oh,
gonna
we
be
can we can try. No guarantees though, because I did a bit of homework for this one, but not much. And as always, disclaimer: learning in public. No promises. Not taking any sides here. This is really just trying to wrap our heads around this topic.
absolutely. And I will get us started. I have this really nice website that I visit from time to time to get all these impactful graphics called Visual Capitalist. I don't know if you've seen it before. I think it's
No, I
great.
haven't.
You haven't? All right, then you're in for a treat. I think it's still loading. Okay, it's gonna just pop up momentarily. There we go. Yeah, Visual Capitalist is great. Just can't recommend it enough.
Mm-hmm.
So let's check this out. First of all, maybe we start off by trying to understand what are the world's largest energy sources. See, the world's largest and notable energy sources. We have here solar, solar park Muro in what's this? Germany, 637 megawatt hours, largest in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Enough power for 40,000 people in the European Union. Tesla power plant, I cannot pronounce it. Something a Azam. Can you pronounce that?
Kaide Azam.
Thank you. And uh, Agua Caliente Kamuti. Oh, in India. Cool. Oh, this must be Longyang Xia. Never heard of it, but check. It's pretty cool, huh? So you can see the some of the largest power plants, power generation places. I presume. Oh, what's this? Biomass burning wood and trash. Uh, in Belgium, there's one called what? Rodenhulze converted coal plant, and there's one GBR. What is GBR?
Great Britain.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you. Right, right. 33.4 million people in UK, powered by burning wood. And that produces what 47,956 megawatt hours. So that's what 47 gigawatt, nearly 48 gigawatt hours, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That's enormous. Then there's geothermal, there's wind, and then there's coal. And you see these start to go out really far to the right. When we get to coal and oil, less than coal, surprisingly, gas, really a lot, and then nuclear, uh, the highest for anything that requires, fuel. And then hydro electricity is just amazing. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Hydropower. I'll send you this link. Yeah. But I think I found this really cool because I think we don't really get a sense of scale about uh, how much power is produced in power plants and how much we consume. I guess this doesn't really tell us how much we consume, just that these are some highlights about some of the plants that uh, exist in the world. And here we go. Total energy generation potential. It's not the end yet. Great. Solar, we're only using what 0.5% of potential solar and 0.8% of potential wind. That is pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think that's it. Okay, the rest of it is a lot of description, and I don't want to spend time on that. Oh yeah, and then there's this world electricity mix to show us what what we're using to get our power right now, and coal is over a third, with the rest far behind. Yeah, even the next number two is gas, and that's less than a quarter. All right, so that is that is my start. Please.
That's a very interesting start. The first kind of list of power plants and energy sources, that's obviously a non-exhaustive list, so it's good to have that perspective. But the second graph is crazy, right? So let's start from that point on, that the fact that we're using about 1% of the solar potential, or like obviously 0.5%. So for simplification, I'm just going to say 1%, and same with wind,
Yeah.
which means essentially we could potentially multiply our usage of either of these by 100. So in a way, solar itself or wind itself could cover all of our global energy needs if we were to maximize that potential. Obviously, that's kind of theoretical maximum. In practice, neither of that is probably going to happen. But this is a great start from that point of view, that this tells me that in a way, solar alone or wind alone or either of or both of those combined could essentially replace all other energy sources that we have. And that is a very interesting start.
Ah, that is an interesting start, but I think it's interesting for the entirely different reason. And so, for our audience, I must preface this by saying that Balach and I will disagree from time to time, and this is one of those times. This makes things more interesting because we don't want to have, it's not as much fun to listen to two people keep saying yes to each other all the whole time that you're listening. So let me present my case. you know, I just looked up. I used ChatGPT to find this out. This is great. Um, I asked ChatGPT how much energy did Germany consume in 2020, and I asked this because ChatGPT only has data up until uh, some sometime in 2021, so it's not. It doesn't have the full 2021, so I have to ask it for 2020, and told me that approximately 11,000 petajoules or 3,000 terawatt hours were consumed in Germany in 2020. 3,000 terawatt hours. And I also asked ChatGPT what is the total energy storage capacity of all the lithium ion batteries made in 2020. And ChatGPT came back saying that all the lithium ion batteries made in 2020 could store 345 gigawatt hours. And again, that's to 3,000 terawatt hours consumed just by Germany. So we're talking about a difference of about 10, about 10, yeah, an order of magnitude off. So if we produce 10 times more batteries uh, in 2020, then we could store enough energy for Germany. And the reason why that's important is because solar and wind need, they're time sensitive. You need to store the energy produced in order to make use of it later in the day. So that's our bottleneck. That's one of the bottlenecks, a huge engineering bottleneck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helps to put that into perspective, right? So with solar, it's very clear to understand. It's easier to understand, you're producing electricity while the sun is shining. You can now produce electricity at nighttime as well. We have photovoltaic cells that can do that, but of course the efficiency is much lower and there's less photons in the air. We're basically capturing photons from the air, and there's obviously much more when the sun is shining. So solar is kind of day and night. And with wind, you have higher production when there is higher winds, and when there's lower winds there's less production, which means there's uneven production, and which is why you need to store these. So storage is definitely a big piece of the puzzle. It's not one to one, right? So if
Yeah.
while you're producing, if you're feeding it directly into the grid or using it, let's say I have a house on the outskirts of the city and I've got solar panels during the daytime. In a way, I'm using electricity as it is coming through. And so I don't necessarily need the battery to 100% store it. You still need capacity, capacitors, all of that. Let's not going into the details of the electrics there. But yeah, for nighttime usage or for during times of low production, you need that. So not one-to-one, but definitely this is one big piece of the puzzle. It's the same with hydro in a way. If you're not feeding it directly into the grid, you have to store it somewhere for later consumption. And hydro now goes into using ocean waves and so on. And there as well, again, there's uneven production, but the usage in a way, you got to keep the wattage within a certain range for our appliances to use it. So you need some way of storing and then releasing that energy at a certain cadence. We kind of went into this battery thing, but just to kind of complete the beginning picture that you shared, I wanted to share this other link, and I'll first drop the link for you, and then share my screen, because I think that helps give this perspective. So let me share this screen here.
Sure thing.
And so it follows from what you were showing, but maybe shows it a bit more visually here, that essentially around 70 to 80%. So in this link here, it says about 80% of our energy consumption worldwide is coming from non-renewable sources, fossil fuels, so oil, coal, gas. So at the moment, the way we use electricity, energy, these are the three big sources, and they cover about 80% of our needs. 20% or so comes from all the other renewables, biofuels, solar, wind, hydropower. What was interesting looking at this, I mean, that's understandable, right? We went from kind of burning wood and whale oil for lamps 250 years ago, to burning oil and coal and gas that we dug out of earth, and it has served us really well. And naturally, it is the dominant source. What is interesting then, of course, is to see how the world has been changing, right? So it's not 80% across the board. Not every country, every community uses 20% renewables and 80% non-renewables. So this was very interesting for me to see, because you think that Northern Europe, where we talk a lot about renewables, would be naturally right at the top of this, and there should be very little fossil fuels. But actually, that's not true. I think Sweden has the best mix, but even there, if you look at this, you've got about total of 60 K kilowatts, and you have around 35% coming from fossil fuels. So around, let's say, 60% or so coming from non-fossil fuels, but that also includes the nuclear. But other than that, France has a bigger nuclear contribution and very low other renewables. Fossil fuels still dominate. What was interesting, I'm just going to throw these two countries in, because I'm in Germany and Vedin is in Singapore. Not that we ever have to focus our discussion on these countries, but it helps to see this. Because they were not there, like I had to do this. And I was surprised. And like, this is unbelievable, right? Like, I did not expect this at all. I thought Germany would have a lot more renewables, because we talk about it all the time and there's a lot more going on around here. And I thought Singapore was probably, already kind of on some other level, because I just always associate Singapore with the most advanced research. And this is what I see. This is very crazy. And if we put it in relative terms, so just to make the percentages very clear, you can see, funnily, Brazil has like 46% of its energy needs coming out of renewables. Canada has 30%, and my beloved Germany actually only has 19%. Great, but very little. We're still using 76% of our needs are met by fossil fuels. So yeah, I'm sure there's more we can get into it, but this is kind of the picture. Globally, around 80% of our needs at the moment are being met by fossil fuels. Luckily, we have not run out of them yet, and they have served us very well. But they're there, and these are sources that essentially we extract, burn, and then they're gone. So we need to extract more. Versus renewables, you have a source of it that is always there. You put in some work to convert that energy, but that source is kind of theoretically non-exhaustible. The sun is still going to shine for a few billion years, and thanks to that, actually, wind will continue to blow.
Yeah, fair enough. Uh, you know, I learned that there's a big scam going on in renewables. Have you heard about a big scam in renewables?
No, tell me.
So, what do we have in renewables? Like, what counts as renewables? Obviously, solar, wind. Um, what else? That
Hydro.
hydro, geothermal, right? Anything else? So there's one more called what I think biofuels, right? Like biomass. Biomass. Have you ever thought about what biomass means?
I'm assuming it's all of our trash, right? Or
Yeah, trash and wood. Trash and wood. So you'd have this, everywhere in the world, you have some amount of logging, you have some amount of timber that you can't turn into product. So you might just burn it, right? And that somehow has become categorized as a renewable when it is the some of the most polluting, I presume, because you're burning like actual wood. Uh, it's not like more efficient in some way. It may be more dirty, more polluting, but it got lumped into that category. I think if you're listening in to us for the first time and you're not sure about this, look it up, guys. It's real. So that's a really strange thing. Did not expect that, but yeah, for reals.
no, thanks for putting it out there. Over here in Germany, oftentimes we have similar discussions when we talk about foods with ecological and bio labels, right? And there's a whole range of that, and this is important for myself and anybody listening to remember that when you see the bio label, it doesn't necessarily mean that the animals were treated in a very specific way, that it's a humane way, or that they're kind of living their free life. There's the free range, and then there's the different kind of sizes of cages, and there's a whole spectrum, and it's the same with energy sources. And so apparently, biomass actually does include burning of wood. It's very interesting because one of the other links I saw, since I was looking at the needs that we have, how we are fulfilling those needs, and what is happening in terms of going away from fossil fuels. And later we can get into why I think that's a good idea. Like, that's my position, to be very upfront about it. So I looked at the investments, and there's this link. I'm just going to put it up because I just want to show the chart. And so this chart is showing global energy investment. So every year there's companies, governments, they're putting money into energy production. And this is a simplified version that kind of says, right, so there's some investment that goes into end use and efficiency. So transportation of energy, storage of energy, less kind of better machinery right at the end usage. So a more power efficient water kettle, and things like that. And then there's the power sector, and I did not expect this. The greenest thing on this chart is actually
It's the
coal,
color.
oil, gas, and low carbon fuel supplies. So this chart is, these things can be very misleading. You read biomass, you read renewables, and that includes burning wood, and you read energy investments, and one third of that is still going into fossil fuels, right? So we are sustaining, not just as kind of, we're still supporting that fossil fuel industry in very real ways. And then there's the part about fossil fuel subsidies, which is in trillions, about 7% of global GDP or 6% of global GDP still. So there's a lot of kind of terms can get easily get mixed, and you have to kind of put in a bit of an error margin. That's how I see this. If I read 20% of global needs are being met by renewables, it's probably a bit more uneven, and the data is from 2 years ago. Kind of oil prices have changed, and that has an impact on how much people use as well. So so you have to take it with a bit of kind of assuming that there's a margin of error there.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that we've been scammed by how it's categorized, how some of these energy sources have been categorized. Take, for instance, so I just did a quick Google while we were talking. On Guardian, yeah, is burning wood a step in the wrong direction in 2021? The question was asked, and there's this very telling paragraph here saying burning wood for energy is inefficient. Biomass has been found to release more CO2 per unit of energy than coal or gas. And that's some kind of like regulatory capture by industry. I think everybody recognizes this. However, so I I want to be fair. I don't think that energy companies are big companies and they are subject to uh, the temptations that all companies are. Like if you're really big and the organization's complex, there's plenty of shenanigans, bad things going on. That goes absolutely without saying. But I do want to point out something that we don't hear often. That is, they put a lot of money, so they do actually put their money where their mouth is. So Duke Energy is one of the largest in the United States. And oh, please let me. Oh man, yeah. It says here Duke Energy will take a 1.3 billion impairment loss on the sale of its commercial renewable business, which it now expects to close later this year. Uh, Reported this year, just quite recently, February 9th originally. So it's very recent. They put, see, a lot, huge billions of dollars into renewable projects like solar panels. So this is to me, this is important. Like if we're going to think about renewables and think about how is the energy landscape changing for us as humanity, this is the case that we all want to see, right? We all want to see the largest energy companies take this kind of thing seriously and put money into it, and they have. And if they can make it profitable, who's in a better? Nobody's in a better position than experts in energy to try to make it profitable. That is, if they can make it profitable, they would rather make it profitable because then their ESG score is good and they make money. Everybody wins. We still don't have to love them. It's just enough for them if we don't hate them. But if they can do it, they would do it. But they have been having some difficulty, and that's the key here. You can see that taking a loss, they're writing off $1.3 billion on their renewables business. It's a tough place to be in, tough business to do, and they're not. Wait, oh no, it's the same thing. Duke takes 1.3, so that's huge thing. Shell also did this. Shell hits the brakes on growing renewables unit after record 2022 profit. So they made a lot of money in 2022, but they're not growing the renewables unit further presumably because it's not that profitable. See, Shell invested 3.5 billion in the unit in 2022, doing wind and solar farms, carbon offsets, carbon capture, biofuels, and so on. And the CFO says we will make sure that those investments go into the areas where we can see line of sight towards attractive returns. So they got to be able to see, how this leads on to the ROI. And this is significant for us, just to know that in two of the largest companies, Duke Energy, Shell, they see difficulty on the way to, making growth, big growth in renewables. And this is the last one. BP scales back climate targets as profits hit record. Also very recent, 7th February of this year. Yes, reported record annual profits and scaled back plans to reduce the oil and gas it produces. So they were going to reduce the oil and gas they produce, but that plan has been scaled back. Let's see. Scale back plans to cut carbon emissions to reduce its oil and gas output. So all these big energy giants, I'll stop sharing now, because it doesn't make it. I already showed the highlights. I think it's significant that they have seen a lot of difficulty in taking us further down this renewables path. Now, I don't know the exact reasons, obviously, and I don't think the articles delve into that with any great depth. Like, for instance, Duke Energy says, we're writing this off, we're writing this off as a loss and we want to sell it for cheap. And then Shell, what do? They say, oh, we're not going to put more money into it, even though we have record profits. And yes, we hate them. We don't like them at all. But if they sense, an opportunity, a way to profit from renewables, we know that they will take it because that's just what they're about. So this tells us, well, our takeaway, I think, without assuming too many things, would simply be that, wow, the biggest energy companies in the world are also having a difficulty turning a profit on these, and that is notable.
Absolutely. I do want to add a different perspective as well. So this is a very useful perspective to have. Renewables are not as profitable as fossil fuels. So that one thing is clear, right? So three of the biggest oil fossil fuel, let's say, resellers, if they are not producing themselves all the time, at least they are the biggest companies. They are telling us that renewables do not make as much money as fossil fuels, and their thesis at the moment is that fossil fuels are still the thing to bet on, and take some of the bet off the renewables, and that probably makes sense. I think the assumption that a big company would automatically go towards, let's say, the more profitable thing is a bit naive, because
What?
well, which photo company was that? Was it Konica or Nikon? Sorry, I just cannot remember, but
Okay.
it's this big thing that we all talk about, that these guys had some of the earliest research, and they had some amazing prototypes around DSLRs. They even put some out there, but then the company basically said, no, we'll keep on producing the older style cameras while the world was switching to DSLRs and digital cameras, and they basically went out of business. They had absolute dominance over the market, and like, despite all the right things, all the research they had, including putting out models, right? So it's not that they didn't even try it, they failed. And the same happened to Nokia, absolute dominance over the market. They even had prototypes. They had basically everything you can imagine, right? So their success was not the result of a fluke. Their success was the result of good business practices, good engineering, being at the forefront of technology, and then they just blew it, right? So it can happen. Just putting it out there that we cannot just assume that the company would end up even prioritizing the right profits when they're staring it, when it's staring the, in their face. So that's one part of it. The other thing I want to add is the fossil fuel subsidies right now are still 3 times that of renewable subsidies. So if you are a fossil fuel producer or seller, just from subsidies, if you produce X amount of renewables and you get $1 as a subsidy, versus the same amount of fossil fuels and you get $2 just in subsidies, I mean, you are going to prioritize fossil fuels. So I think that they're just telling us the truth. And by the way, I thought a lot about do we really hate these companies? I guess some people do. Honestly, they're just businesses, right? They're selling and we are the ones buying. So let's be honest, people of the world, we are the consumers. If we don't buy it, they don't have nothing to sell. We are all in this together. And the companies are doing what the companies are built to do. They are maximizing their ROI according to their understanding. And literally, the way the world right now works, you're getting twice the subsidies on fossil fuels than you are on renewables. So there's essentially, in a way, no incentive for the consumer or the company.
I see. So those are two really good points. One is about the profit motive. I don't quite understand. I understand your example about, like, I think it's Konica, because I never hear about them anymore. Uh, but how I don't understand how that relates to like oil companies. I know, because Konica missed the boat on DSLR, and Nokia missed the boat on smartphones. So, but I don't see that oil companies are missing the boat on anything.
Yeah, no. At the moment, the oil companies are not really missing the boat on anything. The parallel is that for those two companies, Nokia and Konica, they essentially, the argument there, and I can say this because I worked for Nokia, so half of this story comes from
Insider
reliable
knowledge.
sources and insider knowledge. The arguments in the boardrooms and in the high-level discussions were 98% of our profit comes from regular cell phones, so why make smartphones? We are the market leader. Why should we assume that Apple is going to beat us or
Yeah,
anybody else
no,
is going
I
to beat us?
understand that. I'm just
Right.
thinking about it from the oil company's point of view.
Yeah. So those two companies basically didn't see the future where the world was moving towards. For the oil companies, in a way, you could say, well, that argument in that sense doesn't hold because, well, assuming there's unlimited supply of oil and using oil is not bad for the environment.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you mean. So it might be a case that, they need to plan ahead, like take more care to know, like, how much oil do they actually have to sell. I see what you mean. Yeah.
It's kind of investing in the future, right? If the world
Yeah,
is moving
yeah.
towards solar, then of course it's not going to be as profitable at the moment, but that is where the
Yeah,
trend is.
I don't see that they're neglecting that, because, as you know, they put in billions of dollars into their renewables. So it seems like they're taking it pretty seriously. And that's one thing we can count on them to take seriously, that is to continue to survive and be profitable. Yeah, we can trust them, so to speak, to take care of business in that way. I'd like to ask you about the second bit though, which was the sorry, what was the second point again?
The subsidies.
Oh, right. So, yeah, I know I have read also that, there are a lot of subsidies around these fossil fuels, and coming from Malaysia, which is an oil producing country, I know where the subsidies go. and it's not to the oil company. The subsidies go to the citizens, so we can buy petrol cheaper, uh, and that's a benefit of producing our own oil.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for the average Joe, so to speak. Is that your understanding as well, or is there something that I'm missing? Because yes, I understand that there's a huge amount of money that goes into oil subsidies, but it's not, to my understanding, to the benefit of the oil companies. It's for to the benefit of the man in the street, so that they can go to work, they can run their business, that sort of thing.
So subsidies come in different forms. Part of that is essentially government footing the bill for the average Joe. Um, so that's one way that and that happens through either paying the producers of the fuels or the sellers to basically keeping the prices stable for you and me while paying the energy company because their prices might be going up or down because at the source there's less supply. The other way would be what Germany did now, which was actually paying you and me directly so that we can afford the energy prices, whether it's our increased needs or whether it's because the prices are going up. And then subsidies also come in the form of if you're installing a new coal power plant, that the government foots part of that bill to incentivize that energy production because the locality or the country needs it, or you're creating jobs and so on and so forth, or your taxes are waived off for a certain period of time. So subsidies, it doesn't mean that government is paying off these companies, just a transfer of lump sum of money. It comes in all the different forms, whether in tax breaks or keeping the prices even for people like you and me,
So,
which sounds good,
yeah,
but it does mean, it kind of sustains a certain way of consumption.
yeah, yeah. I get what you mean. So do we have some, do we know, do we have some data or visual about where a lot of these subsidies go? So just from where I'm sitting, uh, being from Malaysia, yeah, my experience is just that we put money, the government, subsidizes the fuel, not to pad the bottom line of the oil companies because they actually make less money. They're forced to sell it cheaper. Just that the average person, in the street gets to buy cheaper fuel. So that's how they go about it, is my understanding. Yeah. So if that is the case, then when we talk about fuel subsidies, if we were to remove them, uh, I think that would be hurting the average person. Yeah. So it wouldn't be a popular position, but in such an instance, and in Indonesia as well, Indonesia subsidizes petrol for her citizens, and so I would think that in both cases it's not padding the profits of the oil companies, but rather providing a benefit, a kind of welfare to the citizens. Whether or not that's a good thing is a totally separate discussion. But so it's not exactly something that it's not something that is like propping up the oil companies, which would totally collapse if they didn't go in a renewables, and just sticking with oil because of the subsidies. Rather, I think it's the other way around.
No, absolutely. So this is just, it's not to make it about the oil companies. It is in a way standard practice, right? Government's job in a way to keep a stable environment that is to some extent improving. Let's say that's the simplest, to use the simplest terms. GDP should be in some way growing so that people feel that they're being more prosperous year by year. Yeah, and that you're not taking on more debt than you're producing something. Like that's the ideal situation. It's like running a business, but on a country level. You don't want to drive it into the ground, and then it's you don't want drastic changes either, because drastic changes means if you subsidize one energy producer or one type of energy production over the others, in some way you're going to lose some jobs in one and you're going to be creating more jobs in the other. So governments also have the same problem as the oil companies in a way, right? So they're kind of seeing, we haven't gotten into the climate change part of this, but over the years, this is basically the big discussion that even if there was, in theory, unlimited supply of fossil fuels, it's not the best of for us because we are pumping much more carbon dioxide into the air than would naturally be in the air. Which again, like carbon dioxide has been in the air for ever since there have been carbon producing and carbon consuming organisms on Earth. But essentially, the burning of the fossil fuels is pumping much more of it into the air and into the seas, which is leading to also to some extent to the global warming part of the story, and has an impact on the species. And then it also depends on how we use it, transport, etc. Also produces other gases that are not so nice for us. And that's the price that we don't want to pay for, or let's say that's how the argument goes, that's too much of a price to pay. And now that we are smarter, why don't we find cleaner ways of getting that energy, knowing that there's a lot of energy actually already into the system, if we can capture it. And that's why, kind of to bring the argument to a close, that's the challenge that governments and these companies have as well. Where do they want to go? What is the trend, as well as what is the ethical or the right thing to do for the future? And so, yeah, not pointing a finger to governments or the oil companies. Government is just trying to keep it stable for all of us so that we don't get too disoriented. And why change a system that is not broken? And the argument is the system is broken versus not broken in a way. It all comes down to, some people think it's not broken, don't do anything, just let it be. Others think it's already broken and we need to prioritize now renewables over fossils.
But what do you think?
Oh, I totally think that the system is broken and it needs
Right.
to go in the renewables direction. And I'll tell you why. Because this
No, no,
is
I think everybody agrees, Balach. There's no disagreement there. Everybody favors renewables if we can get there, you know, safely, economically, minimal disruption to people's livelihoods. Yeah. For instance, if you offered up like clean air to the residents of Calcutta, they probably say, yeah, sure, yeah, as long as I still get to keep my job and it, my family gets to, have a better future. Say sure. But if they told them that, oh no, well, of course it means that everybody loses their jobs. I mean, you can't ride your motorcycle anymore, and your cousin can't drive a car. Then they may think, I'd rather deal with the smog.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I think that's the case. Can I just mention really briefly that chart you showed earlier? Thank you. Our world in data, great source of information. I looked at it a lot to argue with people during the pandemic lockdowns. It was great. It was great. Lots of nice charts from there, all about COVID. I shouldn't say that word because then the stream will get problems. But yes, Singapore, man, yeah, renewables. Sure, sure. But it's not. So I think it really I emphasizes the point that I've been trying to make in our chats. That is, there is a way to, there is a path to get to a good developed status with a clean environment, and safe streets, clean environment. You have loads of cars on the road, but it's not as if you're living you don't feel like, you are being poisoned literally just by standing on the side of the road. And that is actually possible. So I think that's something that we kind of don't take note of. It is possible with modern technology to keep, fuel efficiency very good. What's that? The emission standards really, if we keep it high, it's actually really livable, even if you generate power by burning oil or gas. I don't know if it's coal, might be, I'm not sure, but definitely car emissions and power generation emissions, you can still keep your, a nice little city nice and clean with the modern technology. I think it is pretty certain that in places like China, where we observe a lot of uh, coal burning, that they probably have really old plants, and that is the ones that get thrown into the documentaries, and we see them. And certainly they should clean it up. I absolutely agree. But I do want to just gently point out that, oh yeah, in Singapore, in the case of Singapore, it points the way forward. That is, oh, you can do it. You can have these technologies, so long as you keep the plants running well. Standards are high, then it'll be fine. May I show a little chart now, because I think you will like this chart. It might be your favorite chart. That'll be my guess.
Let's hit it. Let's see.
Yes, here we go. Check it out. Electricity from renewables are now cheaper than ever.
That's what I love to hear.
Yeah, in 2009, we're looking at $359. What, per kilowatt hour? I don't know what it is. What is it? Do I see? Oh yeah, megawatt hour. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that's 1,000, right? A
Mm-hmm.
thousand. Okay. So that's actually the scale. I think if it's kilowatt hours, it'd be like 36 cents. But that is way more expensive. So in 2009, this is considered way expensive compared to some of these other sources. Let's see, what are these other sources? In red here is gas, right? So you can see here gas. Almost everything's getting cheaper. Then next year in beige is solar. Solar is getting cheaper. Wait, if solar is getting cheaper, oh yeah, photovoltaic. That's yeah,
Mm-hmm.
solar thermal. I don't quite know how that works. Then there's onshore wind, and this is, I think, a huge part of Germany's power grid, right? Onshore
Mm-hmm.
wind, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
the windmills. Nuclear actually got more expensive. Coal's been pretty stable, I think, and gas has gotten cheaper too, and geothermal went up slightly by 5%. But the big story is, of course, solar photovoltaic came down by 90%.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see here a nice little source, a Lazard levelized cost of energy analysis version 14. If anything reaches version 14, you can be pretty confident that they've ironed out the bugs.
Absolutely. And I
Good,
think
huh?
that,
Yeah.
yeah, this is these are the kind of things that put a lot of things in perspective, right? So, yeah, solar or renewable sources are newer, which means there's more investment. They're costly. You have to figure out the materials. You have to figure out the logistics around that, and that's a lot of cost. But every year, it gets cheaper. I was I was I partially watched a documentary about some new developments in photovoltaic cells. So normally you have these kind of thin brick-like things that you put up on your roofs, or you have seen solar panels, that kind of small notebook-sized panels that fit together, and they have a certain degree of efficiency. Now people have been coming up with new materials which essentially require like and less than 10%. They say up to even just 1% of what a regular solar panel requires in terms of materials. So these things are just 10% or less of that, and they have at least double the efficiency. because essentially they're kind of like thin, flexible, um, kind of like strips, like plaster strips, that can also be stacked on top of each other, and then they can take an energy at different bandwidths, um, which also then allows them to capture some more energy during daytime and also more during nighttime. So this is only possible as a result of certain years of investment into that direction, where businesses naturally tend towards, can we make this process more efficient? And even though the traditional solar has become much more cheaper, as you showed, there's incredible possibilities that we still have to explore and experience, where we could be getting double the efficiency of solar energy production with 10% of the cost, because that's the other part of it. Like, it's not just that you need less materials, but that it's much easier to manufacture as well. And this is still to come. This is still to be used on a bigger scale. The same goes for wave energy. Like, countries are still trying to figure out what the regulations around that are going to be, the kind of machines that we're going to be able to use for that. But the waves are always there. That's another thing. They're day and night. They're there. They don't even have the solar issue of day and night. And that is something we haven't tapped, right? So kind of in a way, with um, wind turbines, we started off earlier, and we have more or less a more established way of working with those. We have installations with solar. There's still a lot of progress to be made, and we're just getting started with wave energy. And I do think that's an amazing possibility to look at.
Yeah, that's a funny thing though about this wave energy. Um, I've heard for years about the potential to harvest wave energy, offshore wave energy, and it doesn't seem like there's been any significant progress to it. I don't really understand why. Um, Also, it seems that I looked up something, and this is a pretty big deal in my opinion. So there is a organization. Let me just share my chart. Oh, right. So there is a website for an agency called the U.S. Energy Information Administration. I think their job is just to share energy information. And one chart that they have is the average power plant operating expenses, right, for these major U.S. investor-owned electric utilities. So they're big. They're meant to be very efficient, and they're meant to generate a return for their investors. So they have to be good, or else you'll lose money and they'll shut down. So they have it as a time series over various years, and they have a few categories for us to consider. Like, what is the mills is something very special. Just have to know that 1 mil is a thousandth of a US dollar, or a tenth of 1 cent. That's what 1 mil is. So mils per kilowatt hour is what we're given here. So we'll start with the total. Let's just start with the total. So in 2021, uh, it's 22 mils per kilowatt hour, or
Or about
what's it?
2.2 cents.
Correct. Yes. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, sir. And then fossil fuels, 3.5 cents. Hydroelectric, very cheap, 1 cent. And then last is gas turbine and small scale. This is not very convenient because they lump a few things together: gas turbine, internal combustion, PV, and wind plants. So I don't get to break them
And
out.
it says photovoltaic as well.
Yes,
Oh wow, that's quite a grouping together of everything.
yes, it is. So, but look at the progress that's been made. uh, in 2011, just a decade ago, it was 44 mils, or 4.4 cents per kilowatt hour, and now it's gone down by uh, over a third, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or about a third. So that's really good. Excellent progress. None of the other uh, energy sources have shown anything like that kind of progress. Everything has stayed pretty much the same. In fact, hydro has gotten more expensive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that's a good thing. That's a pretty good thing, and you can see that even in that previous chart that I shared, you can see that the costs are coming down, and it's shown here. Uh, but yeah, definitely, if you have the takeaway here seems to be that if you have a nice big river in your country, use it. Use the big river. It is excellent.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things there might have to do with more regulation around dams, but I'm just speculating what might have caused it to be more expensive. Because back in the day, you could just clear out villages and cut out whatever you needed to and build a dam because you could. And more regulation, more safety requirements might have made it a bit more expensive, but it is still by far the cheapest, it seems. So why don't we use it? And I think the other part again, when I think about these things, I think this is my own judgment, but I think less like a reactionary and more like a futurist, and I think that is a perspective we need a bit more in terms of what can we do. Not that we have to run away from fossil fuels. I mean, they've done wonders for civilization. Let's give credit where credit is due. But now we have more technology, we have more understanding, we have all sorts of simulation possibilities, we have all this experience behind us, that we can incentivize some more research, and get even higher efficiencies in things like hydro, for example. You have all these amazing new turbines that people are building that actually sit at the bottom of the river or the seafloor, not out in the oceans, but close enough to the shores, that doesn't impact so much the sea life either. You know, you don't have sharp blade turbines that will just cut everything that comes into contact with it, but things where fish can still swim through and relatively unobstructed. So you don't necessarily even have to build a dam to get the best out of hydro anymore. So this is fascinating. Thank you for showing that graph. Like now I've got something to point people to when we talk about different energy sources.
You're most welcome. I'm thinking that yeah, obviously everybody wants to uh, generate more power cheaply. I think that's kind of the number one thing that improves everybody's lives. Cheaper power. It's just that cheaper power. If we had cheaper power, everything improves. From the biggest consumers of electricity, like your internet plans are cheaper, your mobile plans are cheaper, your utility bills are cheaper. Uh, uh, Traveling around the city, or traveling around the country is cheaper, which is better for everything: tourism, food transport to your food gets a little cheaper. So it's like, if everything around you, every single thing, the books behind me, the toys behind me, the food I eat, the uh, tea I drink, if everything got 5% cheaper, this mic I got, it's a significant upgrade in quality of life. So I think it's without a doubt that cheap energy, or cheaper energy, is a significant driver, for better quality of life. And there is a little, uh, let me see, there's a little chart like the last one from Visual Capitalist. So there's a nice big chart on global energy prices. There's a lot to look at, but I don't want to spend too much time here. I want to get to the we'll put all this in the show notes, yeah, for everyone to look at. And here's the places where energy prices are really expensive. So you can see that for petrol, Hong Kong's expensive, Iceland, Norway, Barbados, Denmark, Greece, Finland, Netherlands, Belgium. Electricity prices, yeah, it's most expensive in Denmark, Germany, Belgium, Bermuda and Cayman. Of course, they're islands, so everything's expensive. Jamaica as well, UK, Spain, Netherlands. So it appears to be the case uh, that the you know, isn't it funny? You would think that the more advanced an economy, the better they are at acquiring cheap energy. But and so you might expect that there'll be some really poor countries at the top of these lists because poor countries haven't got all their infrastructure together to get cheap energy. So by this, you could imagine, right? So I'm just trying to present a bit of a puzzle. Not necessarily a mystery. I'm sure it's explainable, but it's a little puzzle. Like, why wouldn't the richest countries have the cheapest energy and the poorest countries have the highest energy costs? Um, and I think that feeds into this argument that uh, if you can give cheap energy, you can get hold of cheap energy for a country or city, then they have a better chance of attaining a higher standard of living. And then, as they get richer and richer, then they can afford to turn to uh, cleaner sources of energy, which are actually more expensive. Actually, I'm just now explaining away the puzzle. I think that's the explanation. The reason why the islands had high energy prices because they have to import everything and it's really expensive. Then the reason why they have the European countries have high energy prices because they can afford it and they choose to pay a little more to have a cleaner environment. But the poor countries, they do not pay a high price for energy because they cannot afford it, so they never reach that top 10 list. That would be my explanation for that. So I think this actually reinforces how important it is to have cheap energy for the peoples of the world to improve their lives. I mean, look at this. Liberia pays less than a cent, where let's see, the United States pays 16 cents. What are they paying for? A kilowatt hour. Right, right, right. So Liberia, super poor country. Is that Liberia? It is, I think. Yeah.
So shouldn't they be more prosperous as a result of that?
Well, it's obviously they've got a lot of other things are not going well for them, I presume. Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing to add as well in this conversation. Cheaper energy is only one part of the picture, right? So
Yeah.
we have higher energy needs, and the way we use that energy has, let's say, over the last few centuries, has only, in general, improved our quality of life.
Absolutely.
Over here in Germany, we have heating, we have double glazing. It just feels very comfortable, even though it's 0 degrees outside. It feels quite comfortable here, but that's because we are using energy in a way that makes our life easier at this moment. Now, in other places, you might not have that because the regulations are too lax or not enforced, or the situation with law and order, for whatever reasons, is just not there. So it's not evenly distributed, and even though you might have cheap energy, you might be using it in a very different way. And so I think there's a big question also of how the energy is used and brought to the people, and what roles governments, let's say, since those are the governing bodies, can play or have to play to actually get the best out of the energy supply for their people. And this is something that can be driven by policy. It's easy to say that you can write to your representative and lobby. Please do. Everything is needed in the story, but kind of making use of the lower energy prices to make life better for us is is um, is is another parallel game that we have to play. It's another board in this 3D chess that we have to play. It's not just about bringing down the prices of energy, but how we use it. I wanted to throw this in, maybe a bit kind of tangential to this, but with all the rage about the smartphones and the batteries needed for electric cars, there's the discussion around different materials that we need for them. And cobalt is one that is needed, especially for these lithium ion cobalt batteries. And apparently, Democratic Republic of Congo (DRC) supplies about 70% of the world's cobalt needs at the moment. And it's another kind of country where you would say they should be rich. They should be the Wakanda of Africa. But they're not. They are DRC. Just like Liberia is
Shithole.
Liberia.
I'm the most unpolitically incorrect guy here. Shithole.
But it's sad, right? It's kind of like people working their asses off, producing something that the world needs, and is willing to pay for it, obviously. But then they don't seem to be really benefiting from that. And the best they can do in this documentary was one of the mines, which is run as a cooperative, brought in some Chinese consultants to help them kind of regulate or establish a nicer working, a bit safer open pit mine. Right. So
A
great for
safer
them.
open pit mine.
Yeah. I mean, that's great for them, but that's essentially the kind of situation they're in, because the alternative is kind of smaller mines running on the black market. Somebody starts digging, in the outskirts of the city where nobody's looking, and then there's children working in those mines, and there's not enough beams. It's kind of like a hole that goes deep into the ground, and people die. Right. So compared to that, the open pit mine is heaven, and it's run by the cooperative, and there's forward thinking enough to bring in a consultant.
I'm
I mean,
sorry, I can't stop when you talk about having a safer open pit mine. I'm sorry, it's just me.
I feel you, right, and that's essentially the tragedy we have, right? We kind of we haven't yet found a way to kind of bring the quality of life to everybody. It's
Yes.
very uneven, yeah, even though
Yes,
it's
progress is uneven. Yes.
and then kind of bringing some more factors into the quality of life, right? So heating is
Yes.
great, but it would also be nicer to have cleaner air. If the cars weren't producing so much emissions, great. Like, why wouldn't we take it?
Yes. I think it's while you were talking, Balach, my mind was really active, and I had two responses to what you're saying. Talking about the Congo, right? They've really suffered. They've had like changes of government and dictators and everything. So it's not a laughing matter until you said like a safer open pit. It's like seventh circle of hell needs more diversity. The demons are not diverse enough. How can they possibly cover all the needs of torture that the diverse condemned require? Okay, sorry. So sorry. There is this book I heard about, and I think it's rather silly to talk about books that you heard about. You should read it. I understand. Please don't. Yeah, give me a chance. I will read the book in time. It's called "The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas." Omelas is just a made-up name. It's a science fiction novel by famous author Ursula K. Le Guin. Ursula K. Le Guin. You may have heard the name before. And the synopsis, very briefly, is that there is this paradise on Earth called Omelas, and everybody who lives there, is happy, everything's great, the air is clean, blah 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 blah, all of that stuff. Now, there is a catch though. There is catch is that the constant state, it says here in on Wikipedia, the city's constant state of serenity and splendor requires that a single unfortunate child be kept in perpetual filth, darkness, and misery.
Oh, wow.
So you have this perfect city that you can live in, but the only, cost is that one unfortunate child must be utterly miserable. And one citizen, blah blah blah. That's just the key of it. And we have something a little bit like that, right? Because we all know about now, if you didn't know before, about the people in the miners in the Congo, in the open pit mines. And yes, there is like one specific place. There was this guy on the Joe Rogan show, a guest who was explaining exactly about this, I believe. And now I forgot the name, but you're right. And it's one place that supplies like over 80% of the cobalt or something of the world. And we are all living in that omelas in a way. Our smartphones, all the people in Foxconn who, are underpaid, overworked, and who occasionally try to kill themselves. So they had to put nets outside the buildings because it's just that tough. Uh, it, it, I don't know, what can be more vivid. Like it's so tough that you don't just want to quit, that just leave, like forget it, don't pay me anything, fine, I'd rather just leave and go home. No, they actually want to kill themselves. That's unthinkable. So that is and the pits, for the mining really speak to us, and I think we all have to make our peace with that, because this is the true world that we live in. There are costs to the life that we live, and I'm not one to be overly sentimental, because I'm the one, in who constantly talks about, like we have to fossil fuels not all bad, like here are the actual dollar amounts, how much is the efficiency, and so on and so on. So I'm not the one to take that kind of view, but even so, this when I heard of this novel and it painted so starkly the situation that we find ourselves in, I just wanted to mention that so everyone knows. And then second thing, which if you'll just allow me very quickly, uh, have you heard of the most expensive city in the world?
Um, no, I haven't.
This is the world's most expensive city, and it might surprise you. Hong Kong knocked off the top spot by this unlikely contender.
And
Let us see. The capital of Angola, Luanda.
oh, wow.
Exotic paradise. If you're an oil industry expat. Look at it. So this is Luanda.
Mm-hmm.
It looks amazing. It looks very developed and everything, and it has a thriving oil industry. And if you are not oil industry expat or local, you will live in the slums, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it is the most expensive. The capital is like that. They have something like American style suburbs. They have, all the conveniences, that you would expect as, an demanding expat. Have like French food, freshest Italian food, and so on. Because there's a lot of money floating around there. But it is like kind of artificial, right? Here you go. Luanda, more expensive than Hong Kong, Tokyo, Zurich, Singapore, and so on.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah.
I think that's a good point to leave our audience, because it is something we all need to think about on our own, the kind of world we want to live in, you know, and who gets to benefit and who gets to pay the price for somebody else's comfort.
Yeah. Tis true. Tis true, my friend. Maybe, delay or defer the purchase of that new iPhone or Android that you've been thinking about, like make it last another year or more. In your own small way. And I forgot why I wanted to talk about the most expensive city. it was responding to something you said, but yeah, it's a little surprising.
That's going to come up. We're going to have many more of these calls.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we wrap it up then? It's already,
That's
yeah, been over an hour. It's a good chat. I think I barely noticed the time fly by.
I could keep talking for another 3 hours as well, but I think it's good to have some breaks and get to some
And
other
spare our
commitments
audience. All right.
and spare our audience as well. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks, Balach. And thank you, dear audience. Talk to you again next week. Yes?
Absolutely. See you soon.